Ready to go.
Okay, thank you. Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Dina Romero, and I'm the leader of Bath and North East Somerset Council. Thank you for joining my panellists and I tonight for a webinar on green homes. So, when the Council declared a climate emergency in March 2019, we committed to provide the leadership to enable Bath and North East Somerset to achieve carbon neutrality by 2030. We know that one of the biggest challenges in cutting district-wide carbon emissions is how to improve energy efficiency of homes across Bath and North East Somerset. So for today's discussion, I am delighted to be joined by Councillor Sarah Warren, and I'm very delighted to welcome 3 residents who have all got practical experience of doing projects in their own homes that improve energy efficiency. Each panellist will take us on a brief virtual tour of the measures that they've put in place in their own homes and how they went about it, sharing valuable insights along the way. At the end, I'll put some of the audience questions to the panel. I'm aware that this is a huge topic. We've got an hour for this discussion and we're focusing on matters at a very practical level and hearing firsthand about these 3 real live examples of how to improve energy efficiency in a home and cut the carbon emissions. I'd now like to pass over to Councillor Warren to give a bit more of context.
Hello, so I'm Cabinet Member for Climate Emergency, and last year in 2019, after declaring the climate emergency, the Council did some research into what were the most significant sources of carbon emissions in Bath and North East Somerset. And what we found is that emissions from homes is one of our 3 largest sectors of emissions. It's really important that we tackle the energy efficiency in the homes that are already built, as well as thinking about new homes. So there's a question: what is our role as a council? How do we, the council, see our role in helping residents with this? And the answer to that is that the council has been running an energy at home service for a number of years and continues to do so, which signposts homeowners and renters to advice and expertise by applying for funding. Now there's a new grant come out from the government's Green Homes grant, and we're not in control of it. There do seem to be 1 or 2 issues with it, but we are trying to support where we can and help people find their way through this. And we're also working on skills and supply chain development, because one of the issues is that there aren't enough qualified installers. So, for example, we ran a few weeks ago a Green Skills webinar. If you want to know more about that, you'll be able to find that on the Council's YouTube channel. And then holding sessions like today is about giving people ideas and inspiring them and sharing local knowledge and expertise. One piece of good news that has come out in the last couple of days is that the government's Green Homes grant will be extended for another year, which will hopefully encourage many more suppliers to train up and get registered, so that might resolve, we hope, the capacity problems. But we are going to be continuing to engage and lobby government to help them to work out how to make this a more effective scheme. So other things we are doing, so we're working directly with Bath College on training and skills. We've got projects that we're running like Future Proof that I think we'll be touching on a bit more in more detail later, that are about upskilling workmen and matching homeowners with installers. And we're creating an installer directory. And the other thing to note is that we will be having the review of the local plan, the partial review of the local plan, which is about the planning rules and the SPD on sustainable construction. I'll hand back to Dina from there.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And yeah, just picking up on that last point that you made about the local plan partial review, which is to align policies with our climate commitments, that we're actually having a webinar on that on the 14th of December. So please sign up to that one. I'm sure that will be very interesting as well. So without further ado, I'd like to now move on to our homeowners so they can share their experiences with you. So first off, I'd like to hand to Kate Legreese Mack, who would like to share her Georgian home retrofit with you.
Kate, I'm sorry. Kate, sorry, we can't hear you.
My apologies.
Thanks. Sorry about that. I couldn't unmute your microphone.
Thank you. Living in a Georgian building is an honour. You're in a bit of history. It's beautifully built from a time when great care was taken with materials, stonework, windows, doors, everything was very carefully thought through and nicely designed. The pictures that you can probably see at the moment are to illustrate some details of what modifications we were able to make to the house to make it more energy efficient, which I'll come to in a minute. But the first thing I wanted to say was that even if listed, and people often moan about listing constraints, it isn't necessarily a bad thing. Get to know what the listing is, what the details are, and understand why it's listed. That helps enormously. Then you can spend your energies on things you can do rather than things that you can't. And don't try to undermine the listing, but to follow it and understand it. Then look at the Bath Preservation Trust's online book that helps with tips about how to convert, how to live in such a house for up to modern standards. And here I've written down a few simple steps. Firstly, appreciate what the house does offer, such as light. Often these houses are very well designed to capture natural light because, of course, they were built at a time when there was no electric light, and so any natural light was valuable. So orientation is quite important, and maximize it, benefit from it rather than try and shut it out. And don't try to turn it into a sort of open space grand design, because you'll soon find that the rooms don't really respond well to being opened through unless you're happy to spend an enormous amount on heating. So in the winter, close doors, and in the summer you can open up and relish in the air moving through the building. Double up openings, for example, with second doors, and that's where we come to the first slide on the left, where there's a passage out to a door that leads to the garden. And the second door, which had been taken out when we bought the house, had been removed. But actually it's a brilliant extra bit of glazing and weather protection, and also provides a nice space for hanging coats. Do the same with blinds and shutters. The middle picture shows a shutter which had actually been screwed to the wall when we came, but it's been unscrewed now and rehung. And then the window, which is the original Georgian style of window. I'm sorry about the perspective. It makes the panes look as if they're different sizes, but they're not. We've had those re-glazed with a laminate glazing, which is not double glazing, so it's fully permitted under listed building rules and is available from the Sash Window Company. If anyone's interested, I can supply the link. So with that sandwich glass material in the original narrow bead window frames and the shutters, it's amazing how much warmer and quieter these rooms are. Then insulate where you can. You can insulate roof spaces and floors in particular, which does also make a huge amount of difference. Just drafts up through floors can be quite a problem. Okay, you can't insulate the walls, but certainly, as you can see, the sitting room wall in the middle picture on the left is about 2 feet thick, 2 feet of stone. It's pretty good insulation, as long as it's dry, of course. Close down into the smaller rooms in winter, open up in summer. And finally, there was a conservatory. Now on the right-hand side here is a pair of double doors that actually are in the place of where once was a Georgian window, looking out into the garden. When I bought the house, it was obscured. The view to the garden was obscured by a very modern timber extension conservatory. So took that down and replaced it with the one bit of modern that we got listed building consent for, which allows the view through to the garden. It also allows the view back to the house to show the original features of the house, but provides a nice connection. And the next slide will show the connection staircase. Michaela, if you can show it. That one on the left provides a nice opportunity to get downstairs and to go straight out into the garden. The grid floor allows air circulation through the 2 floors and also allows the light to go down to the ground floor at the bottom of the stairs. So again, it reduces the need for endless light switches and lighting. So there are things you can do which are modern on a listed building. And finally, our one failure, this one area of roof, which is out over a porch door, also to the garden. We had permission to put solar hot water tubes, heat catching tubes under this. It looks like slate, but it's actually a glass tiled roof. But sadly, it was not a tried and tested system, and I wouldn't recommend anybody to try and use it again because it just jammed up with the antifreeze that was in circulation under the roof. So that was our one little failure, but everything else has made the house extremely comfortable to live in, given, of course, that you have to slightly change your way of being from living in a modern house. But for me, I wouldn't swap it for anything. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate. And there will be, some questions after we've seen every panelist's home and heard their advice as well. So I'd like to now introduce Tim Williamson. I'm just waiting to, I think we need to, you're unmuted, and I'm hoping that we'll have some slides up for you in a moment. So Tim Williamson, who has a 1930s home and is going to share his experiences on the 1930s and also touching on the Victorian times as well. So over to you, Tim.
Hi. So we moved about 3 years ago from a cold, dark, damp Victorian house to a lovely 1930s semi-detached house, which was snug, and it's got cavity walls, 1936, which are insulated. And can I have the first slide, please? And you can see on the left, one thing where we were getting cold air was coming up through the floorboards in the kitchen. And I've tried putting those little beading and rubber threads down between the floorboards. To be honest, as you can see, not very successful. But what we did do was take out the kitchen units and have underfloor heating. Marvelous, lovely warm kitchen, really pleased. So next, on the right-hand side, that's a common problem. Your front door and the front doorstep is worn, so there's that sort of gap below the front door, and you're always getting drafts coming in, and typically the older doors tend to sag on their hinges. So putting in, you can see a little wooden porch up there. Yeah, really pleased with that. So it keeps the drafts out. Next slide, please, Michaela. Thank you. And apart from other things, on the left, you can see our garage, and the plan is to get off-street parking to have electric supply to electric vehicles. And so I have applied for planning permission to remove most of the garage to enable access for an electric vehicle. But I've applied for planning permission for 3 energy saving measures, and I've always found it difficult, and this one's no exception. I can discuss that more if you want. Now, flipping back to that Victorian house that was cold, dark and damp, particularly the west-facing wall, which was exposed to the wind and the rain, we were getting condensation on the inside of that wall, such that the wallpaper was peeling off. So this was the reason we chose to put external wall insulation, and to be honest, the result was wonderful. And that wall dried out and the whole house was warmer. And I would say the bad aspect was it took me 2 years to get planning permission, partly because, well, there's some technical problems, but also it was very depressing and demoralizing, and it's not usually like me. So the other thing that was really difficult about it was the mess that the builders made. They were roofers, and they were sort of breaking the neighbour's gutter and leaving a mess. So that was quite difficult. Right, so I've finished my bits about energy saving measures, and I just want to mention our local group in Widcombe, which used to be Energy Efficient Widcombe. And we've got, I'll tell you what, Michaela, can I just show you the thermal image camera? If you take, yeah. Now, what's that look like? Is that looking like, anyway, this is our little thermal image camera. And we have been going around houses, all sorts of houses, with householders and finding energy saving measures and discussing what they can do about it. Unfortunately, with COVID, that's not working. So we're having to lend it out and giving them all the information how to use it online. So that's in process at the moment. We have felt in Widcombe that we're not doing enough, and there's the very welcome Baines emergency to get us carbon neutral by 2030, and we feel we need to up our game. So we're extending our work, and we've recalled ourselves Go Green Widcombe. And here is, because you'll all want to, if you live in Widcombe, I don't know if you can see that, ggwidcombe@gmail. And so we're interested in developing deals on solar PV. We're interested in encouraging people to switch from into green energy suppliers away from burning fossil fuels and power stations. So if you want to contact us on our website, you go through Widcombe Association and look at community matters and clubs and activities, and that's us there. Finally, there was a question about the new groups that might be forming, and I have to say that I think this is a wonderful thing to happen. So if you're in a parish or somewhere where there's a local community, I find it can be very demoralizing if you're just on your own and you're thinking, well, you know, I'm trying to do green things to my house. You know, what's the point? Nobody else is. And, you know, climate change is happening faster than we can imagine. But if you get together in a group, you'll find lots of other people like-minded, and it's a very empowering thing to happen. And after all, you don't have to be an expert. I mean, I don't know much about these things, but I'm learning as I go. And you'll find that it's quite a sort of powerful way forward. And lastly, there was a question about Bath Green Homes. And that was an event a few years back run by the council and Transition Bath, where people would open up their homes and visitors would come around and see what energy saving measures were done. And I was one of the, it was our house that was one of the houses that people visited to examine the external wall insulation that we had done. And I think it was a very successful event. We had lots of visitors, and should it happen again, it will be very useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. And in a way, this is a preliminary to that type of event. So we're having a virtual tour of three homes that have done retrofits. So I'd like to pass on now to Philip, who would like to talk you through a 1970s home retrofit.
Hello, I'd like to take you through what I've done over the last 8 years in making this 1970s home, my home, almost carbon neutral. It's in a rural area. It's a reasonably large 4-bed home, 1970s, and it's, I think, representative of a lot of homes outside the centre of Bath. Could I have the next slide, please? This is a quick summary of what I've done. So the first thing I did when we moved in was to get the cavity walls insulated and the loft insulation topped up. I then installed solar panels, so they were installed on the garage roof. Didn't require planning permission. You would require planning permission if you have a listed building or in a conservation area or on the World Heritage Site. The biggest thing I've done was to install an air source heat pump replacing my previous gas boiler. That had the benefit of reducing the house's heating carbon emissions by 75%. So it was a sort of really big change. And as the national grid decarbonises, that will increase further by 2030. It'll be a factor of 8 reduction over the previous gas boiler. I looked around for installers, got installers to help me make decisions about the sort of heat pump and the what would happen. It was paid for by the government's renewable heat incentive scheme, so the cost of the installation was almost exactly the cost of the heat pump. It took about a week in the summer. The hot water was off for a few hours, so it wasn't too disruptive. The heat pump, which you can see in the bottom left-hand corner of the slide, was installed behind my garage, and then hot water pipes were run under the path next door, and it was plugged into where the gas boiler used to be. So it was relatively straightforward. I had to have a new hot water cylinder. I had the house rezoned at the same time, so I've now got separate upstairs and downstairs heating zones. So I can heat the upstairs at different times and the downstairs, which also saves energy. Overall, it was quite straightforward. I had to have bigger radiators throughout the house because heat pumps run at lower temperatures, but and it's reduced my heating costs by more than 50% because I use low cost electricity. I've also replaced the wood burner in the house, and it's got a catalytic converter, and it's much more efficient. I've got all A++ or A+++ appliances in the house. The LED lighting's reduced the lighting requirements by 80%. I wear warm clothing in the winter during the day and turn the thermostat down. And I monitor the electricity usage within the house. So with all of these changes, my carbon emissions are down 98%, which is sort of quite a large number. Also, my fuel costs are down 80%, most of which is down to either behavioural change or the air source heat pumps. So I would encourage people to look at using air source heat pumps. If you want to learn more details about what I've done a 6-page write-up, which is on the Transition Bath website. So transitionbath.org/news. And there's a case study under there about what I've done, what were the challenges. But overall, it was relatively straightforward. Done.
Thank you, Philip. And can I just say to everybody that we'll put the links to the various organisations and any other information on our YouTube channel onto the link to this webinar. So I'd now like to invite Funda Kemmel, who is an architect and urban designer for Bath and North East Somerset Council, who will tell us a bit about the council's resources. And I think you're also going to tell us a bit about the Future Proof project for the West of England as well.
Yes, thank you, Dina. Just looking at the shared screen, please, Michaela, to talk a little bit about what the council has available for people to look at in terms of resources. Are you able to see the shared screen?
It's not coming up yet. I'm sure Michaela's got it all in hand.
Yeah.
Just bear with me a moment, please. Carry on and I'll bring the slides up.
Okay, so on the council website, there is some information on both the sustainability website and on planning, talking about the planning policies and different supplementary planning documents that we have available that give information to householders for what energy efficiency measures they can make in their homes. So our document, which is the supplementary planning document, SPD, as I'll refer to it as, is aimed for small scale development and householders. So it is very specifically looking at what practical measures people can do to their own homes. And it begins by talking about what those buildings might look like. So there is a sketch or a drawing of each of the different types of house in our district, beginning with historic buildings and looking at the way that the walls are made up and the roofs are made up, so that you can see where cold air might be coming in and where heat might be being lost. And then going through to Victorian and Edwardian homes, which are very, very common in our district, and then into pre-Second World War homes with early cavity walls like 1930s houses, and then going on to post-Second World War homes that are beginning to utilise the building regulations, and also with cavity walls. So all of those building types are described and drawn so that you can hopefully apply it to your own home. And then the types of measures that people can look at applying to their homes are discussed very simply. So things like consents, whether you might need listed building consent or whether you might have permitted development rights, are discussed. So here you can see the different drawings of the measures, and this is the front cover of that document. And I've marked here all of the different types of measures that are included in the contents, starting with how to make the building energy efficient first before going on to renewables, which are also discussed in the document. So moving on, these are the drawings of the houses. You can see that they are cross-sections, so you should be able to spot where in your structure drafts and leaks might be happening. And then moving on again, looking at what issues of moisture might arise in your particular building. This is talking about damp and condensation and the need to ventilate, regardless of whether you do any measures. These are considerations that have to be looked at. And then moving on again, once the measures are described in the document, you will find these diagrams that look at where things are. So this is looking at insulation, where it would go, what you would expect to see in your structure, what kinds of materials you could use, and that this is all annotated. There's also an indication of whether consents might be listed, might be needed, and then what the effectivity and general cost might be, a ballpark cost, which was gleaned at the time that this document was prepared from quantity surveyors. So they should be realistic, albeit maybe slightly out of date now. And this document is due to be reviewed and updated. It's part of the local plan review, and you will be able to join a webinar on the 14th of December to look at how to get involved in that process if you're interested. And then moving on again, the document also signposts information that you can try to find based on what you're looking for. And at the bottom there, where it says how to apply, that is where to go to look for pre-application advice and to check whether the intervention that you want to make for your building is permitted development or not. That will be a sort of first port of call if you're unsure. Otherwise, the planning portal is also very useful and straightforward to use in that regard. And then moving on again, we have a guidance document that complements the SPD, which is all about listed buildings and undesignated historic buildings, looking primarily at solid wall construction and the particular difficulties those buildings have with interstitial condensation and moisture. So you will be able to find a little bit more detail in there. Moving on, that document looks at all of the different kinds of measures, and it begins with very low impacts measures, such as reinstating blinds, shutters, and making repairs, as Kate talked about in her Georgian house. And it talks about each of the measures compared to one another in terms of carbon savings as well. Moving on. There are case studies included, and then the final page talks about, so moving on again, please, Michaela, some of the other places you can go for information. Now, Kate spoke about Warmer Bath, which was prepared by the Bath Preservation Trust together with the Centre for Sustainable Energy in Bristol, and that is very specifically looking at the Georgian buildings and the historic and designated buildings, primarily in the city of Bath. But there is also another project also hosted by the Centre for Sustainable Energy in Bristol, CSE, called Future Proof. And the telephone number for them, which is a free phone number, is there on your screen. You can contact Future Proof for advice on how to create more energy efficiency in your home on the phone. So it's a way of speaking to somebody directly and going through their website. You can put in the type of building that you have, number of occupants, number of rooms. And that should be a good way of just getting you started before you start looking for funding and people to carry out your works for you. So that's all from me. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Funda. And in case you weren't able to scribble down all the information that was put there, don't forget that will be available alongside the recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel. So I'd like to move to our last panelist, to Chris Mordaunt, who is the Housing Improvement Manager for the Council. If you've got anything else you'd like to add to what's already been said.
Thanks, Tina. So yeah, I mean, we've probably just mentioned the Council's Energy at Home website and information service that was mentioned also by at the beginning by Sarah. So we try to signpost and provide information on the basic measures, not as much detail as Funda's gone through, but and also sources of funding like current grants or loans that are available. So yeah, we can be contacted by email or go through our website energyathome.org.uk or phone us up. And also currently we've got a grant at the moment available for it's a local authority delivery green homes grant for EPC, EF and G properties that are occupied by people on lower income. So anyone that wants to get in touch with us about that'd be great. In terms of rented housing, owner occupiers and renters that are on can also apply for that grant. But also just if there's a renter that is concerned about the energy efficiency of their home, everyone renting a home is entitled to see a copy of the EPC for the property and check that it does meet the minimum energy efficiency standard, which is at the moment is EPC E, rating E, which will be being upgraded soon by the government. I think that's probably enough from me.
I think you could just answer one small question before you go,
Yeah.
Chris. What does EPC stand for?
Sorry, Energy Performance Certificate. Yeah,
Thank
very
you.
good. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Right, well, that leads me quite neatly into the next part of this webinar, which is the question and answer session. So we've had quite a lot of questions that have come in, and I'll try to marry them up with any other comments that I see on the chat, which are by and large are quite specific about help that people want with their you know, particular issue in their property. So the first question that I'd like to ask, and I think you've broadly mentioned or answered this already, Chris, but I'll just check in case there's anything else you want to add. So this is a question from Jackie Cosgrave, and it says, who can I talk to? Where is the information and advice that is reliable?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, to get you started, Energy at Home, my team at Energy at Home, which we're it's the council's housing standards team that know about buildings and property in general. So that's a good start. So that's the basics. And then further information, there's really good, the government website's pretty good, simpleenergyadvice.org.uk. And then the next thing to do, I'd say, is obviously the CSD Future Proof scheme is very good, funders mentioned. And the other thing is, once you know roughly where you're going, is to try to get in touch with one of the installers to discuss your requirements with them. The other thing, yeah, is get an EPC done. So that'll give you a very basic understanding of what the main issues in your property and tell you what your rating is if you haven't got one already. So the Energy Performance Certificate is also a very useful source of information.
So you mentioned installers. Is there a list of you know, perhaps accredited or installers that have some sort of recommendation?
So currently, that's something we're working on. We haven't got one of those available yet for Energy at Home or for the council. But at the moment, you can look at a couple of places for. You can look on the Government Simple Energy Advice website as part of the Green Homes Grant. It gives a list of all installers that have got the government recognised accreditations. But also you can look, if you're looking for something like low carbon heating, like Philip was looking at, you can look at the MCS certification scheme website for home renewables. So that's another good website. We'll put that on the chat later on.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chris. So
I don't know if anyone got anything they want to add to that.
Well, I was going to ask our home,
yeah,
our homeowners actually, if they went through those routes, or if they found they had to navigate their own route to getting to where they wanted to be, and also what other frustrations and difficulties they may have had. I don't know who would like to go first. Maybe perhaps Tim, as you've had two types of housing. Perhaps you could start off with some of those frustrations and difficulties and whether or not you were able to go the route that Chris has suggested.
Yeah, I did know this question was coming up. So particularly for external wall insulation, it was the problem with planning permission. But I sort of didn't use any other organisation because I knew there was damp in the house, and I just saw this as a way to resolve it. So I'm just thinking about other frustrations. No, I haven't got anything else to add. Thank you.
No, that's great. Thank you. Perhaps Kate.
Right. Yes. Well, when I did mine, which was 13 years ago now, there was very little help available from the council. So I'm a bit blown away by all these various links that there are now. But I think I learned most by talking to people who'd obviously done something, and having an architect who was a friend, that didn't have to pay, but who gave me lots of good advice. For example, about things like getting the little beads in the sash window frames, which actually are automatic now. If you go to the sash window company, they fit them in, so you don't get the draft around the outside of the frame. You just have to gradually accumulate other people's experience, I think, to make it work.
So do you think there's any improvements left that you might utilise the resources that we've been talking about and get those jobs done too?
Oh yes, I mean, I've just already made a note to get in touch with somebody for advice about a heat source pump. I don't want to go on burning gas anymore, so that'll be an interesting challenge.
Okay, thank you, Kate. And Philip, talk us through your frustrations.
Yes, I guess the biggest frustration was, it was a year ago, just over 18 months ago, trying to find an installer for my air source heat pump. There are absolutely none in Bath or Baines. And given that the council on our behalf have committed to making Bath sort of carbon neutral by 2030, we're probably going to have to install about 60,000 of them in the next 10 years. And that's going to be a bit of a challenge without installers at the moment. There are a lot in Bristol and surrounding local authorities.
Thank you, Philip. And I guess that's a piece of work that we need to get on with then as a council, and as through our work perhaps with the college as well, to train people up to do those sorts of jobs. Tim, I'm coming to you.
Yeah, I've had a thought since I last spoke, and actually I talked about the difficulty of getting planning permission for external wall, and partly in those days it was seen as a house extension. And I had to see if it was affecting traffic and animals, and that was just crazy hoops to jump through. And now I have to say that I did present my difficulties to Jane Wellblood, head of the sustainability department, and she has taken it to planning, and I think things are a whole lot better now. So I just want to emphasize the help that Energy Efficient Widcombe, now Go Green Widcombe, has had from the sustainability department. We started off as energy champions, that was back in the day, and I think the support that we've had from various staff there has been really helpful. And one of the difficulties has been keeping up to date with these grants that come and go. And now with Green Homes Grant, we've got to have the job done. Well, as of yesterday, it was by the end of March next year, but I think it's extended another year. So it's sometimes a struggle to keep up to speed with all these changes that are happening to grants. So I would say, as we do appreciate the support we've had from sustainability department, and from time to time there have been meetings which allow community groups to get together, and that's been very valuable, so we can share information between each other. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. And just to reiterate that point, we will try and make sure that we have all the up-to-date information on our website as well, so that if you are interested in retrofitting your home and making it a warmer, more pleasant place to be, as well as helping us tackle climate emergency, then you'll be able to access all your information from there. Now, so Chris, you did mention renters in your piece. And I just wondered if there's anything more you could suggest for renters, who might want to improve perhaps energy efficiency through non-invasive structural methods, and also what can renters do if their landlords put additional barriers in their way?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we have to say for this that it really is down to having a chat with the landlord, really, because a lot of different people have different arrangements in their tenancy agreement. So I think that's the most important thing, is to check that. But the typical potentially, it could be things like with the permission of the landlord, things like secondary glazing, or thicker curtains, having doors that close properly, and that's you need that for good fire separation anyway. Having heating controls, thermostatic radiator valves, so you can control the heating more, to have a suitable temperature depending on the room. yeah, I mean, that's probably the most obvious things.
And I don't know if I know the answer to this, but can you give any insight into perhaps work that our registered social landlords might be doing, such as Curo?
Yeah, so yeah, they have you know, they have been surveying their stock, and their EPC level is higher than the overall stock. But yeah, they're at the moment, they're kind of gearing up. So they have been recently starting to bid for government money for improving some of their properties, and they do seem to be on the case. They've just recently we're putting a bid with Curo for a large block in Keynsham to upgrade that to with heat pumps and external wall insulation.
Mm.
And we're about to embark on a project with them to do underfloor insulation on some of their properties as well.
That's really helpful, and I think good news for a whole range of different people in terms of, you know, where they live. So there's several questions here about hard to heat houses. You know, you might live in a barn conversion or something similar, so where you might have old stone walls and brick extensions. Have you got any advice for that sort of home? I don't know whether or not any of our panelists, any of our homeowners have had some experience with that hard to heat type of property. Kate?
Well, you can't really do better in a big open space like that than wall hangings, curtains, all the things that actually reduce airflow and enable you to reduce your space that you're using at the time in a temporary way, so that when you want to open it up again, you can. So screens and big curtains are enormously beneficial. On the curtain front, I didn't mention curtains as well as shutters, but we're very lucky in Bath because we've got a what's it called, the shop that sells old recycled curtains down in Whitcomb.
Person Exchange.
Yes, thank you. And you know, they have wonderful, well-lined, beautiful curtains that come out, I assume, out of either very wealthy Georgian houses or hotels very often, and they are of a really high standard, and it saves you spending a fortune on curtains, and can make a terrific difference.
Thank you, Kate. That's really good advice there. So I just wanted
Sarah
to ask
wanted to.
Oh, Sarah.
I was going to say I've got a solid walled home as well, and I have looked into whether internal wall insulation might be feasible, but so far I have shied away from it because I think it does present some technical challenges, so I haven't quite dared to go down that route. So like Kate, we keep the doors shut in winter, and I learnt how to make lined interlined Roman blinds, which are very expensive to buy, but they're not that difficult to make, so they're not rocket science. And so all our upstairs windows have those, and again lined and interlined curtains everywhere.
Thank you, Sarah. Tim?
Sarah, I mean, sorry, I'm flogging external wall insulation because it can overcome some of those problems about joists between floors. And of course, there are always problems with planning permission with external walls, but might that be possible in your house? Is that, and I'm thinking the people who lived in barn conversions, is that possible?
I'm sure there are houses where, yeah.
However, I mean, all the air source heat pumps and other non-gas means of heating a house all require a well-insulated house, whatever.
Understood, and I'm sure there are homes in Bath and North East Somerset where that would be possible, but I think ours is in the area of outstanding natural beauty. I don't think it's going to be a goer, and there'll be lots where it isn't possible, unfortunately.
Which is why, you know, it's really useful and helpful to hear, you know, how different people have tackled the different problems that they've experienced. So I wanted to ask another problem that's been given to us as a question is around damp. Now, I do recall one of the panelists did speak about damp. I think it might have been you, Tim, with your damp Victorian house, and wondered whether you had any advice about that and whether or not you, so this specific question is about damp patches after cavity insulation was installed.
Oh, that's a worry. That might be a technical issue of the insulation not being properly fitted and having a cold bridge. So it might be worth going back to the person, the company that installed it, and check it out. But I don't have any experience of that. Philip, do you know?
Philip, you need to unmute.
Sorry, I wasn't listening to the question. I was typing an answer for somebody else.
Yeah, Philip, this is somebody who's got a damp patch in a wall, and it's to do with cavity wall insulation. Whether it's related to that.
It could be. Generally, it's an issue with the sort of surface of the outside wall and how well pointed it is, and stuff like that. It can be quite. I've used the thermal imaging camera to sort of sort out where some of these problems have come from. But a lot of the time, it's just detailing. If you do have a problem, you should be able to get the cavity wall insulation removed under the 30-year guarantee, which normally comes with that. But it's generally, that's not necessary. It's just sorting out the outside wall of your house. And you can get some good treatments these days for coating the house, which is A, breathable, and B, reduces the amount of sort of rain penetration into the outside wall.
I can answer a little bit on that as well, Dina. So if you have a part of your wall that has had insulation applied to it, that becomes warmer, then when that comes into contact with the cold part of the wall, you have a dew point, and then that creates damp or wetness or condensation. It's called interstitial condensation, and that point where they meet, that's called a cold bridge, and that's where that occurs. And so it is really, really important to make sure that where insulation is applied, it is detailed properly around windows and door frames, so that those cold bridges don't occur. And our document talks a little bit about that, but your installer should be aware of that as well, and your architect if you have one, or a surveyor if you have one as well.
Thank you, Funda, and hopefully Andrew V, who sent in that question, that gives you some places to go to get this problem resolved. So I wanted to just touch briefly then on what drove you to retrofit your house with these energy efficiencies. Was it about money? Was it about doing good for the planet? What would you say was going to be the best incentive, perhaps for others, to follow your examples?
Can I start?
You may start, Kate. Yes.
In my case, it was meanness. I think I objected to being told that it would cost me £1,500 a year to heat the house. And it doesn't now, partly because I generate quite a lot of electricity over the perfectly hideous garage roof down the lane, and partly because of what we've done, that our consumption is much less than I ever expected, and partly because I wear woolies in winter, like some of our other speakers. But it has been very satisfying. And then once you start on that route, I think, I find myself thinking, what can I do next that makes it even better? So it's addictive. It's quite a nice addiction.
Excellent. Thank you, Kate. Tim, what drove you? What was your motivation?
Well, I'm quite old now, and back in the day in the 1970s, there were books about climate change and the greenhouse effect, and I thought then, this is crazy, we're just burning fossil fuels like there's no tomorrow. And over my lifetime, it's been quite scary how those predictions are coming true, and I am genuinely scared about our future. That is my number one driver.
Thank you. And Philip?
Well, my motivation was the environment. mitigating climate change, reducing our carbon emissions. But if you get it right, you can also save money as well. So dual motivations, I guess.
Excellent. So I don't know if Sarah or our officers have any other possible motivations that they might want to add in.
Well, I suppose if you're successful, you might be cozier up afterwards, although that is a trade-off, because I have heard that some people insulate their houses and then whack up the thermostat, and so then they probably don't make the carbon emissions savings. So it's something to be conscious of. But if you go a long way with it and you're successful, you may be much cozier after.
Chris? Once you've managed to unmute yourself.
Yeah. So no, for me, originally, the reason I got into council work was because of environmental protection and sustainability, and I went down the environmental health route, and that sort of took me into people's homes and actually how apart from the effect on the environment, and I completely signed up to the climate emergency agenda. It's the effect on those people that can't afford to heat their homes very well. It's quite miserable, and actually being able to afford to heat your home because you've got good insulation and a decent heating system that actually doesn't impact on greenhouse gases is very important to me.
Funda, any additional comments?
Well, I second everybody else's, and my motivation as a conservation architect to look at green interventions and measures for buildings has always been there. And of course, our existing buildings are inherently sustainable because of the embodied carbon they hold. So the longer we can keep them in use, the better.
Very wise words there. And just talking about those traditional buildings, it's just to say again, I think other panelists have mentioned Bath Preservation Trust as well, who also have a number of case studies of permitted retrofits in traditional buildings, and so we need to make sure that everybody gets to have a look at all those different examples and take something from those, the work that other people have done, and hopefully make their homes better, and in doing so help us, as I say, reduce our impact on the planet. So I think we're surprisingly already at the end of our hour. So before I wrap up, I'm just going to ask Kate and our other panelists if they've got anything additional they wanted to add. Kate?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a question actually, which was, is there any chance of us having the open house event again in the future? Because over 100 people came to my place in a day, and it was such an opportunity to talk to people about what you can do. It really bridges that gap. I wanted to add too that I'm not anti-environmental. I just assume we're all doing it because we want to reduce our energy consumption. If I could have a wind turbine in my garden, I would, but that would cause an absolute riot. So I'll stick with what I've got.
Stick with what you've got, and I think initial meanness, I think is perfectly acceptable in terms of what starts you off on that journey. Yeah. Sarah?
I was going to respond that the Green Open Homes, whilst being supported by the council, was, I think, quite dependent on volunteers, both to open their homes and to organise the event. And those volunteers, I think, did several of them ran it for several years, for 3 years in a row or something like that. And then after that, I think their volunteering capacity had probably run its course, or they moved off onto other things. So if there are any people listening who would like to get involved in running one and have a bit of time to put in, then please do come forward, and that sounds like it's a great idea.
Absolutely. So Philip and Tim, are you going to open up your homes again? Well, you can only share that with me, Tim, if you unmute.
Yeah, because I muted myself. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Yeah, because it brings people around. You have a good chat, and it's helpful. You learn from them, they learn from you. Thank you.
For me, yes, potentially post-COVID.
pandemic. Yes, it's post-COVID. Yes, Philip. You've unmuted successfully.
Yes, I said potentially post-COVID.
Okay,
my answer
that's
to.
great. Thank you very much, Philip. Okay, well, sadly, as I said, that sort of is our hour already up, and we haven't even touched on half the questions that were sent in. But I'd like to just thank everybody for attending, all my panelists for their thoughts. We will endeavour to get all the questions that have been sent in, including those that have appeared on the chat and in the question and answer piece on the webinar as well, answered, and we will put those up on the webinar on our YouTube channel, and some of those, obviously, if they've been asked by a number of people, will feature in our frequently asked questions as well. As I said, we will put up links to grants and any other advice that's been shared here today. And I'd also, having thanked all my panelists and officers, I would also like to thank everybody who sort of tuned in to watch this webinar, and also to everybody who will watch it on YouTube after this event. I hope you found this useful, and it's given you some ideas of how you can improve your home and have a greener future as well. So thank you to everybody. And on that note, I'd like to say good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Well done.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you, Funda.